Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Those King JB of House Pritzker press briefings are really something. On both sides of it, both the questions as well as the answers. And I do like, though, the teleconferencing. I'm getting used to the introduction of the great gazoo that sits on JB's shoulder.
That, dum-dum, is where I have to draw the line. Mechanics I can inspire, but personality is something you have to be born with.
It really adds a lot to the Q&A
What,
section
Michael
in
Alberts
particular.
in the corner there?
Yeah, the
He
great
was in a
gazoo.
red room. Yeah, great gazoo. Yeah, you texted that. But he was in a red room yesterday, and then yesterday he was like a stagehand. He was wearing all black, and the background was black. I liked it better when there was a little color in the background. I didn't feel like he was so lost in a dark, deep hole.
And I love when the governor, a tech entrepreneur, as we all know,
It's pixelated.
I love when he talks about bond issuances. You know, like the way Bob Ross used to talk about the happy little trees that he would paint.
Oh, that's right.
Well, the bond issuances, as you refer to, is simply working with the underwriters to make sure that they've got the right pricing and do it in a way that will affect the state in a positive way. So that's still going, and we expect it to complete. But our focus here is on the overall budget for FY21, where there's a significant affected the revenue for this year. Tax deadline from April 15th into July 15th, following the lead of the Congress to do that. Remember that July 15th moves us into a new fiscal year. So the borrowing that we're doing is really just a temporary borrowing that would then be paid back, based upon that income tax revenue that would come in 3 months late.
Just as simple as that, the happy little bonds that get issued and bought up. And then we take on another $1.2 trillion of debt, and then we pay it back when we get the fresh income tax revenue. It's all happy times. It's all good. And that allowed, dismissal of all of this ugliness with respect to, Green Eyeshade's business, which is beneath the governor, allowed him to get onto the important questions that the Chicago Press Corps had for him, like whether or not you can hire a mariachi band to play on your lawn while you celebrate a birthday or some such thing.
With all of these birthday celebrations, graduations, and whatnot sidelined because of COVID, would it be possible to hire a mariachi, for example, to play their songs outside of a house, provided they follow social distancing guidelines? Is that something you would consider?
Well, I am in favor of celebrations. Obviously Mother's Day was just a couple of days ago, and I know that there were so many celebrations that didn't occur because of social distancing, because people are trying to keep their own families, mothers and grandmothers safe. So all I can say is that I can't speak to the efficacy or the safety of a mariachi band, whether they could manage to stay socially distant enough. And
so whether or not a mariachi band can play in your lawn, that is beyond his area of expertise. Life and death decisions for 12.5 million people. That's what he's really good at.
Well, every day I call it the goofy question of the day. Yesterday was about the mariachis. The day before was, you look like you've gotten a haircut. Did you sneak out and pull a Mayor Lightfoot? And we learned that his son cut his hair.
Actually, the goofy question of the day is 99% of the questions. And in lieu of the mariachi band question and the question about baseball salaries, what somebody could have brought up is that, because this was the blaring headline in all the Chicago news reports, record number of cases reported yesterday. What Pritzker, and thus the press corps, failed to mention, because he didn't mention it and the press corps didn't ask, but suburban mayors were briefed by a flack for Lori Lightfoot the evening before yesterday's presser and told that 2 of the testing sites hadn't reported for 2 days. So tomorrow, this is the briefing of the suburban mayors, you're going to hear a record number of cases, but that's misleading.
Right. And over the weekend, the cases always seem to fall off during the weekends. You go from 3 figures to 2 figures.
And then there's this, as was argued by me and others, but this is just sort of straightforward, even though it wasn't challenged by anybody, I mean, other than Darren Bailey and John Cabello, two Republican state reps and pundits like me, hosts. Where is anybody in this state? Where the hell is the business community, particularly in Chicago? Maybe this will encourage you to find your courage or some facsimile of it. Senior Assistant Attorney General Michael Luke, Chief of the Attorney General's Opinions Bureau. The emergency powers granted to the governor cannot be extended beyond the 30-day period permitted in subsection 7A of the Illinois Emergency Management Act without legislative approval. In other words, and this is good work from EdgarCountyWatchdogs.com. In other words, the opinion of the chief of the Opinions Bureau in the state attorney general's office is that the shelter-in-place order currently in force is illegal.
Okay.
Of course it's illegal. As I said, and finally a lawyer who actually matters said, the governor is required to seek legislative approval for the exercise of extraordinary measures extending beyond 30 days because if you didn't have to seek legislative approval, the whole mention of 30 days in the statute would be rendered meaningless. I'll just do 30 days, 30-day increments in perpetuity. Of course, that is not a reasonable reading of the statute. From the AG's opinion, even though many disaster situations could require remediation for a long period in excess of 30 days, normal government processes, including legislative action, can be set in motion to meet such needs within 30 days of the occurrence. Yeah, that's if all of the deep thinkers and noblemen and women in the General Assembly could gather up all of their IQ points and figure out how to meet.
Well, I mean, are we the only state in this country where the legislature is not meeting?
Don't care. The idea that 177 people and the 4 legislative leaders they all respond to, most of them at least, can't figure out how to meet. This takes weeks and weeks and weeks to figure out how to meet. And you listen to that tub of goo on his 14.4 modem from the AOL days telling us that you're still trying to work it out with DPH guidelines and it's complicated and we need these people to be safe because they're essential. I mean, that anybody buys this is stunning.
On them yesterday. I know. Yeah.
Stunning. It's a joke.
As we work to keep our residents safe and gradually reopen businesses, I hope the legislature will act expeditiously to support jobs and economic recovery.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They need to reconvene. He has too much power.
Comedy in a tragic sense, in a Shakespearean sense. For more on all this, we're pleased to be joined by Ted Dabrowski of Wirepoints.org, who has been writing on this extensively since the shutdown. Ted Dabrowski, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Amy.
So, with respect, let's go back to the bond matter and what the state and the city are trying to get through the back door, finally recognizing just exactly how much peril they're in financially, that they may not be able to get through the front door, and that is leaning on the municipal fund facility the Fed set up as part of all of the emergency actions taken at the federal level to get bailed out through the ability to borrow more.
Yeah, I think the reality of how tough the situation is for Illinois is starting to come through to guys like Pritzker and certainly Don Harmon, the Senate head. We were in trouble in Illinois, dramatic trouble before this crisis hit. Right, we're already almost junk rated. Chicago was already junk rated. CPS 5 notches in the junk. So we were in deep crisis beforehand. Now it's much deeper, and the money they got to find the money somewhere. And so if they can't borrow, and I think the bond market's saying, wait a minute, this Illinois is now a disaster, and you can see that in Senator Don Harmon asking for a $40 billion bailout, that they're not sure where the money's going to come from. And so they've looked at a bond issue, trying to raise $1 billion from the market, and what they found in the first few days of trying to get that money is that it's tough. Either you're going to have to pay through the nose for it, or maybe maybe the lenders don't want to give it to them. So if that's the case, then what Illinois might do is try to go to the federal government and see if they can get some money through this new facility that's being put in place. But to do that, you've got to say that you're not insolvent, and there's a lot of things that go into that. But will Illinois be able to get that money? That's the big question.
Even if Illinois does get the money, even if Illinois got the $20 billion that Don Harmon wanted for state and local pensions, 10 and 10. I mean, at the end of the day, what does that buy you? Another fiscal year?
Well, see, that's the thing. I mean, that's the game that we've been playing in Illinois for a long time. I should say that's the game they've been playing for a long time. They're always buying a few years. And so, yeah, if you get $10 billion for the state pensions and $10 billion for the local to pay that off, they're buying 2, 3, 4 years all the time, and that's been the game, and that's why we've always been downgraded constantly, time after time after time. So the game for them is just to extend it because they're going to be desperate, and if they can play any game to extend this and then hope for a bigger bailout from the federal government, then they can keep playing the game.
Yeah, but at the city level, I mean, police and fire pensions at the Chicago level were under 25% funded prior to the outbreak and the lockdowns. I mean, they have to be short timers in terms of capsizing, don't they?
No, you're absolutely right. Those things they're broken, and I feel bad in many respects for a lot of those workers who are depending on a pension because it's not there anymore. And once the money runs out in the pension fund, they rely on the city to make those payments. Well, we know what's happening to the city. It's already junk rated as well, and it's going to have a huge shortfall in its revenue. So at some point, these pensions are broken, and the reality is that. And I think everybody in the country now knows that. That's what makes this crisis more interesting. Is that where a lot of us were calling this crisis out here in Illinois. Now everybody knows it. Everybody's watching. Everybody's watching to see what gimmicks Illinois plays, and they won't get away with the gimmicks. They'll get a junk rating, and I think there's going to be hell to pay pretty soon.
Wow, Ted, I think you and John Klinger did a great job of breaking down the numbers and how the deaths are linked to retirement homes. And I just want to wait. What county? 85% you wrote about DuPage County COVID deaths originate from long-term care facilities. Yet we're not doing anything to mitigate the problems.
I think that's one of the fascinating and sad statistics is that, something that we knew the first deaths in the country were in the facility in Kirkland. That's where had over 30 deaths in that retirement home, and every state should have known right then that retirement homes, the elderly, because we already knew this from Italy, we knew this from China, the elderly and retirement homes were a huge risk, and Governor Pritzker's first focus should have been that. Instead, I think he spent more time blaming the federal government for a lot of things, and we ended up with over 1,600 deaths. Half of the deaths in Illinois have come from retirement homes, and that's a sad fact. And that's if we need to focus our effort on protecting people, that's the first place we should be focused on right now, and that will stop a lot of the deaths in Illinois. I think it's a disaster of criminal proportions, and I don't know what's going to happen, but our crisis is half the size when you consider that a lot of it's coming from retirement homes.
Mm-hmm. Governor Pritzker says anybody who doesn't support trying to get as much federal money for the state as possible to spend for police and fire and teachers, and by the way, pensions and some other things too, but all to spend for Illinois families is doing a disservice to Illinois families. The context of this are stories like the one out of Rock Island yesterday. This is another Democrat stronghold downstate, Quad Cities. In the wake of layoffs, Rock Island considers raising salaries for elected officials. They're county officials that are making $90,000, $95,000 before you add in the health care and pension benefits. Basically 2x the median household income in Rock Island County. And again, we have seen state and local workers on the municipal side, on the government side, protected during this lockdown and pandemic, while the private sector is hemorrhaging in Illinois like it is everywhere else.
Yeah, it's fantastic that story. And I think what this crisis reveals is what the big problem in Illinois is, right? There's two classes of workers. There's the public sector worker that gets guaranteed contracts, long-term contracts, guaranteed pay, guaranteed pensions. And there's a second class, the private sector, that's getting slashed, cut, fired, furloughed, everything. And yet they still have to keep paying for that first class that has those guaranteed jobs. I have not seen any layoffs announced by Pritzker, by Lightfoot, by Preckwinkle. The unions don't want to get back to work. They're being protected. They're getting paid, while the rest of the economy is just getting killed. And here's the sad part about it. Talking with Steve Moore, right? If part of that $3 trillion package comes to Illinois, as it would, then that allows Pritzker to extend the lockdown. So the private sector pay will continue to suffer, while the money will make it to the public sector. And it's a sad case of events for Illinois.
It's such a travesty.
So what happens?
Justice.
So what happens if we don't get substantial federal money? We don't get substantial access to the bond market. I mean, $1 billion doesn't go very far when you're looking at a $7.5 billion projected deficit for the coming fiscal year, in addition to the backlog of bills, in addition to all the unfunded liabilities, tax revenue holes at every level of government. What happens if you get pennies on the dollar that you need to even sustain yourself for the next fiscal year? What do you see for Chicago and Cook County and Illinois?
Well, then you get the fiscal reality that we should have had all along, right? I think everybody, as I said, everybody's watching to see what games Illinois plays. And what they've done in the past, they've issued pension obligation bonds. They tried to raise taxes. They've done these securitization deals, which are complex, but they find ways to raise money. Now nobody's going to let them do that. And if they don't get a bailout, then we finally get the reality that we're broke, we're out of money, and either we're going to have chaos on the streets, or, and this is the big or, Governor Pritzker, Madigan, and others say, well, there's nothing left to do but to pass some of the reforms we've been talking about for a long time. But the alternative will be reforms, or they'll try to do massive tax hikes. That won't work. Or we'll have chaos on the streets, because it would be chaos.
Civil unrest.
Ted,
you're talking about billions of dollars that nobody has.
Mm-hmm. Or run on the government, and like a run on the banks, perhaps. Well, that would.
Well, it's a lot like I spent 6 years in Mexico, and we had a couple of those type of crises where the international markets just said, sorry, Mexico, we're not lending you money. And we had chaos on the street. We had massive unemployment, inflation. It was ugly, right? And so that the alternative is to do the things the right way, which Pritzker and Madigan don't seem to want to do. But as long as the market keeps bailing them out or giving them money, they can keep playing the games. But when that stops, it's either going to be chaos or time for the reforms we've been calling for.
Recalling happier times in Mexico City with Ted Dabrowski. Wirepoints.org, must-read site for all things Illinois, particularly financially and economically related. Ted, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You've made the switch, and it feels so good. You've switched to Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Investment advisory services offered through Sound Income Strategies, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm. During difficult times, it's important not to be frozen by fear or complacency, thinking that Congress, the Fed, or your current financial planner will fix the impact of the pandemic on your retirement savings. The bottom line is, no one else is going to care about your retirement the way you do. It's time to stop crossing your fingers and toes, hoping for growth, and reset your retirement for income using interest and dividends. Call 888-888